Okay, now we're almost ready to clean these two main processors. We've got our cell processor here, which is the brain of the machine, the CPU, central processing unit, and the graphics processing unit is right here. And that is the chip that, in my experience, is the one that overheats and gives you the yellow light of death. This chip, when it overheats, it gets so hot that the expansion, this processor expands at a different rate than the material of the motherboard behind it. And when allowed to overheat, those two types of materials expanding at different speeds will cause the solder connections, there's hundreds of little solder connections between this processor and the motherboard and this processor and the motherboard, causes those connections to be stressed and broken. When that happens, the machine won't turn on at all, and you have the yellow light of death issue. So what we want to do is clean these processors and the heatsink, repaste them, put them back together again. So what we'll do first is we'll quickly clean off the old dried excess heatsink paste. You can see here on the sides of each of the processors, and we'll just sort of scrape off the excess. A lot of it already fell off. Going to get rid of that excess to begin with. Alright. Then take a little piece of paper towel and some isopropyl alcohol, just regular rubbing alcohol, and we'll clean. I'll turn this around so you sort of see the business side. When you clean these chips off, you'll be able to just read the writing on them. This reality synthesizer, RSX, that's the graphics processor, and over here is our CPU, the brain. We want to clean off all of that old factory Sony heatsink thermal paste. It's a good quality paste they put on, but again, after about 2 years, we open these machines and we're replacing hard drives and power supplies and whatnot. But whenever we do, we get down here to the processors, and if it's 2 years or more, they are bone dry. They are just aching to overheat on you. So better to be proactive, take a little bit of time. I'm doing a lot of talking and yakking here, but when you're not talking, you can get through these things in really less than a half hour, clean it out and be done with it. So those two chips these two processors are nice and clean, ready to go. Let's set the board aside for a second. And we'll go ahead and clean the fan and the heatsink. First we'll just talk about it a little bit. Now the PlayStation 3's fan and heatsink assembly, it's really quite a monster. I mean, they didn't spare any expense or any space here. It certainly takes up a lot of volume. And if you look at the size of the fan, I mean, it's almost as big as your outstretched palm, at least a child's palm. It's a heck of a fan. It moves a lot of air. And what it's doing is, when it's inside the machine, it's pulling air in from the right side of your PlayStation and blowing it out the back. And it moves a lot of volume. A lot of people will buy the $20 intercooler fans, the external fans that you can plug on, and I'm all for that. It just increases airflow, and that's great. But just like your car radiator, you know, you can have a great radiator and a great fan. If you don't have coolant in the radiator, you're going to be on the side of the road. So it's critical, critical, critical to have fresh, clean heatsink thermal paste on the heat sinks. Let's go ahead and clean off this excess paste again from the edges of both heatsink blocks. And each one of them is attached to the underside of the CPU, one to the GPU. Now let's just quickly clean off the residue. Actually, let's blow off some of the dust real quick. Just around the sink blocks here. Now we'll clean these blocks. This isn't this isn't NASA. It's not a clean room at a hospital, but we do want to get it as clean as possible within reason, because what we're trying to do is to make 100% contact between these flat blocks and the flat processors on the motherboard. If there are any gaps in there that you might get with dirt or dust or unevenly spread thermal paste, any air gaps are going to reduce the effectiveness of this radiator, of this heatsink. We're going to kind of clean it with a dry paper towel, get it as nice as we can. We'll do the chips one last time with a dry, clean paper towel. Okay. And before we paste this, I'll just mention real quickly what's going on here is the fan obviously is pulling the heat away from the radiator, just like your car. Now, we've got the thermal paste spread on the blocks here in between. Well, we're actually going to put the thermal paste directly on the processors, but when you put them together, they're smushed like an Oreo cookie. You've got the one side of the cookie is the processor, the other side of the cookie is the block, and in between there is this very thin layer of thermal paste. Once the heat leaves the processors and travels through the heatsink paste into the block here, then it's carried away by these little veins, these little tubes, little copper tubes. And they're ingenious little tubes. On the inside of these tubes, you've actually got a coolant, in a lot of cases is a type of alcohol, and there's an awful lot of surface area on the inside of these tubes, and what it does is it acts like a miniature air conditioner. And so the alcohol comes in here just like the coolant in your car air conditioner. There's essentially when the coolant contacts the heat, it evaporates and absorbs heat, and then it's wicked back out to the outer regions here through capillary action, and then the fan blowing the heat away causes the alcohol, I say alcohol, I believe that's what's inside these tubes, to condense again. So then the condensate comes back in, gets evaporated, drawn back out, condenses, just again like your car or home air conditioner. It's the same process, just in miniature. So it's really a good system they have here, but again we have to make sure that the heatsink paste is fresh. Over and over again I'm going to keep saying this. That's the main key to this. So we spend a lot of time getting the machine apart, but here's the exciting part. Let's grab our heatsink paste.